The SL is back. A couple of weeks ago, I sent my R230 SL65 out for its very first service under my ownership. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing all the things I did to this car, things I'm going to be keeping my eyes on, and my plans for this car for the beginning of 2026. Before we dive into this initial service, there were some other things I did to this car prior to sending it in for service myself to kind of get ahead on the maintenance. One of the first things I did, super basic, I replaced this tow hook cover at the front of the car. It was missing when I bought it and it was driving me crazy. So I was able to find another alabaster white one on eBay, popped it in, and well, that resolved that issue. Another thing I did has to do with the valve stem caps. They were missing on this car and I just can't stand when little details like that aren't right, so I bought a set of Mercedes-Benz valve stem caps and, well, put them on. Again, super easy, just a little nitpicky thing that I wanted to resolve prior to sending it in for service. And then I did something a little bit larger. I had an issue with this car that only cropped up once or twice, but the car was no longer recognizing the key when I would get close to it. It also had a little bit of trouble starting one day. It kind of was just very unhappy about doing so. So I decided ultimately to replace the batteries. It seemed to be electrically related, and it's just something I like to do when I buy a car for the first time. I like to do an oil change, replace the batteries, replace the cabin air filters, a basic service just to reset the car so that I can be comfortable with it. But the SL65 is not like a normal car. There are two batteries on this car, one located at the front, which is in charge of the starter motor, and one located at the rear, which is in charge of the vehicle electronics. However, I learned something. Although you can buy the Mercedes-Benz branded battery for the front, you can't for the rear. Mercedes-Benz makes a battery for this car, but when I put it in the car, it simply didn't fit. I had the parts department check many times to make sure that it was the correct part number, and well, it's just too large for this car. Mercedes-Benz Classic did not measure the battery compartment correctly for these things, so if you want to replace the rear battery, you have to get a generic one from AutoZone or O'Reilly's or something like that. And that's exactly what I did. So I replaced the front and rear batteries of this car, and that resolved my issue. I haven't had electrical problems with the car since, so I think that it was just maybe a battery that was out of spec or old. This car sat for a long time before I bought it, so it was a good thing to do to just reset the car altogether. With those couple of minor things out of the way, let's dive into the most recent service on this car. Now, when I took it into my independent to have it serviced, there were a couple of things I knew about that I wanted to have rectified. The first was the serpentine belt on the front of the engine. I noticed that it was cracked and looked very old, and that is not something that you want to have snap. So I wanted to have that replaced and all of the accessory pulleys along with it. The fact that the belt was so old made me think, probably should do those as well. They tend to develop wear, bearings start to squeak. While you're in there, just do it. The ultimate case with any German car. I also wanted to have the windshield reservoir checked. This was something that was leaking, and it's a very common issue with R230 SLs, especially on the 65 models. These M275 V12s build a ton of heat in the engine bay until the plastics just get fried. And this was one of the components I knew that was problematic. I knew I wanted my independent to look into this and rectify it, as well, it's just a minor thing that was going to drive me crazy. In addition to those two things, and in the spirit of resetting this car, I wanted to do an oil service, as I actually couldn't find service documentation in its history about the most recent one. I suspect it just got lost due to time. So I just wanted to reset that, and the car also went ding, check engine oil level, and so, well, I felt it was the right time to do that just to get it out of the way. With all of that in mind, let's dive into the services that were actually done to this car. The first thing, of course, oil change. Really easy, replaced it with 5W40, super simple, did that in the filter, very easy. We also noticed that the cabin air filters were kind of shot, so just time to replace that. I think that classifies as a Mercedes A service, I'm not entirely sure, but regardless, we just did those to make sure everything was done. They also noticed that the oil filler neck was leaking. There was a gasket on that, so we replaced that. It was pretty cheap, just did that to make sure we could reduce oil leaks. Then came the washer fluid reservoir. I found out that this part is NLA, no longer available from Mercedes-Benz, meaning that you can't just walk into a dealer and buy one. Instead, I decided to have it repaired, as that made a little bit more sense. I could have bought another used one on eBay that wasn't cracked, but it's going to crack eventually, and ultimately it's better to have a devil that you know than one that you don't. So we repaired that with JB Weld, did a bunch of stuff to make sure that it was as tight as possible, and that no longer leaks, and we repaired that. However, while we were in there, we also found that the lines going to it were cracked and perished, so we decided to replace those too, just to eliminate leaks from that part of the car altogether. On the topic of tanks that leak, we found that the coolant expansion tank for this car was cracked and leaking, so we replaced that. It was actually relatively inexpensive, and we decided to replace the vent hose that goes to it. This cracks very commonly as well, and it was showing signs of being very perished, so we replaced those as well, and that solved that issue. Then, like I said before, we did the serpentine timing belt and the pulleys on the front of this engine, as that was really the only thing that could majorly strand this car. If it breaks, you lose the water pump, you lose the alternator. It's just not a good situation, plus the damage it could cause to the hood and all that stuff. So again, that was really the biggest thing I wanted to accomplish with the service, and we knocked that out. Then we get into some of the suspension stuff with this car. Luckily, the ABC system got a clean bill of health. However, we found that the lower tension struts on the front, the lower control arms on the front suspension, well, they had cracked ball joints, and it was just time to replace them. Wearing component, not necessarily surprising, so we replaced those. You have to do an alignment when you do those, and so that was also on the docket to do. However, there was something that my shop recommended that I was not familiar with. They said that I needed to adjust the wheel bearings. Now, I've been around cars for a long time. I like to think that I'm relatively mechanically intelligent. I've never heard of adjustable wheel bearings before. However, evidently on Mercedes-Benz products, they are. It's a relatively cheap service, and again, one that I'm completely unfamiliar with, so I decided, well, you know, what the heck, let's just do that in addition to everything else. There's also a vibration found with the wheels being out of balance, so we did that in addition to the alignment and the other suspension stuff, just to totally reset everything and make sure that it was all good to go. So those are the services that I did. However, the techs told me there were some things to keep an eye on as I have this car, and we'll just kind of come back to them later, most notably dealing with leaks. We found some engine oil residue and coolant residue on the bottom of this engine, and we just want to keep an eye on things. However, it looks like things had been there for a while, so I asked them to clean everything so we could get a better eye on it, and we'll come back to it at a later time. As far as the oil goes, I don't think this car is leaking all that much, to be totally honest with you. When I got the car, I topped up the oil, drove it 1,100 miles, and right as it was ready for service, it dinged and told me it needed oil. The tech told me it was down 0.8 of a liter, and in my experience with high performance engines, especially based on how I was driving the car at the time, I think that ultimately that's kind of in line with normal oil consumption levels. So yes, the car is leaking. It's a 20-year-old German car. Not really a surprise, so I'm just going to keep an eye on that. Same thing with the coolant, just topped it up a little bit, and we'll see exactly how much is leaking. But ultimately, not too bad. It's kind of what I expected with this car. Again, it's an aging German car. But this first service came to, oof, $4,116.72. A lot for a first service. Now, the shop I took it to is very good. They have a very good reputation. They are not inexpensive, so that is why, partially why it costs so much. Nonetheless, I kind of like knowing that this car has some great service stuff done to it. I like to make sure that I know what I'm getting into and build a plan out for the future. On the topic of the future, hop in the car with me. Let's go for a little drive, and we'll discuss my plans for this car in 2026. 2026 is upon us. So what do I want to do with this car? Well, the biggest thing I want to do is trade cars with Crazy Nick. I want to drive his SLR, and he has said that he wants to drive this car and experience what it is like, both Mercedes-Benz range-topping products of their time. Of course, this one costs about 1/10 as much as an SLR does, so he is curious at how similar the experience is, and likewise, I am curious for 10 times more what the experience is like in the SLR. Despite being range-topping cars from similar eras, though, this one has a much more turbine-like, smooth V12 engine, and his supercharged V8 is much more punchy and direct. So I'm really curious at what the driving experience is like, and there are a ton of other differences between the two cars. On the topic of Nick's SLR, another thing I would love to do is get this car dyno tested. I'm really curious at the power that it is making, and I would love to have that figure for real. Again, this car has all these Rentec badges on and a supposed tune, so I would love to know exactly what sort of power this thing is making. It's damn fast. Whatever that engine is producing, it's plenty. I don't want more, but I am just kind of curious at how much power it's actually putting out. Another thing I would love to do in this car is take it on a little road trip, probably to something like Palm Springs or something along those lines. I just feel that this car really excels at long distance cruising. That's what it was built for, and I'd like to use it for its intended purpose. Honestly, around town, the car is great, and I've taken it to Cars and Coffee many times. I drive it a lot, just sort of in normal day-to-day use, and the car does everything I ask of it, but I am really curious about how good it is on a long-distance road trip. That just, it beckons to me. But ultimately, that also brings me to some of the surprises about this car. One of the things is just how normal it is to drive. Ultimately, it's an SL. They're all great. They're all designed to be used every single day. Just because this was the 65 model does not mean that it's necessarily uber performance focused. I certainly wouldn't call it a knife edge racer. It's very comfortable and very powerful. But the thing with the car is, and if you're a listener of the podcast, you know, I really like this car, but I just don't know that it offers enough of a variety of experience compared to the E39 M5. Like, it's really fast, and the engine, when you use it, is just absolutely incredible. It accelerates like you would not believe. And I really enjoy using the engine, but it's mostly on the highway. Around town, you really can't exercise this V12. In first gear, it just spins the rear wheels. You have to be on a highway in second gear, but when you plant your foot, it just, you know, I mean, it's got so much torque and power. It is astonishing. Nobody can mess with you on the highway. In essence, there are just very few cars that can keep up with you. And that's really cool. I've always wanted to experience this car that way, and like I've done it several times now, and you know, I love driving this car on the highway, but around town it just doesn't feel as special as I would like it to, especially for a secondary experience. The M5 is so refined that it gives me a lot of the satisfaction that this car does around town. The big difference between them is, like I said, when you get on the highway and you squeeze the throttle, this thing is just in a completely different league to that car, and frankly, almost any other car I've ever driven. Which makes me think, is like, do I keep this car long term? And to be honest with you, I'm really not sure. The car I really wanted when I started looking for a car to buy and through a YouTube channel with and all that stuff, I still want a first gen Viper. I've talked about it on the podcast, and I can't break away from really wanting that car. This car is so good and so dramatically different to the Viper, but the Viper just has a sense of humor about it that I love. It's so poorly built, just ridiculously designed, and kind of badly engineered in a lot of ways, but I just love the character of that car. And that car is just opposite end of the spectrum from the M5. It's raw and visceral and, you know, not particularly refined at all. That wasn't anything that Dodge and Chrysler, that's not what they were looking to do at the time. They were just focused on speed. And that still tugs at my heartstrings. I still think I really want one of those cars. And to be honest with you, although my primary car has a manual transmission, I really want the fun car to have a manual too. And I do miss rolling my gears. I don't think this car would be improved with a manual transmission. I actually think that the automatic makes a lot of sense in this car, and as it does with most AMG cars. Having said all that, those things weigh on my mind pretty actively. So I don't know exactly how long the SL65 will be around. I really like this car. I think it's very good, and I think it fits in my lifestyle very nicely, and the engine is, oh my God, it's addictive. Like, just breathing on the throttle, if there's a gap in traffic, you just go, I'm going there, and boom, you're there. I've never experienced anything like this. This engine is a masterpiece. I really love it. All I know is I like this car a lot. I do think the R230 is underappreciated for what it is, and this engine is just, I mean, one of the all-time great V12s. It's just excellent. And that is the state of the R230 SL65. Ultimately, I have some things to keep an eye on, and I have to make my mind up about what I want to do with this car over 2026. But stick along for the journey as we continue to have fun with this incredible bi-turbo V12 monster. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you very soon. Goodbye.